Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Bible in the year 2021, and I really hope this works this time. This is my third attempt to do this. I won't explain what happened the other two times. Welcome to day 100. Yay, day 100. You guys have accomplished something. Just throw a party, balloons and streamers and cake and the whole bit because you guys have just hit double or triple digits here. And we're looking at 1 Samuel chapter 9, 10, 11, 12. And I promise you, it's not going to be as long as that may sound. So we're getting into something interesting here. We're going to get into Saul, and in the first verse of chapter 9, we see that he's from a rich family, and in verse 2, we see that he actually looks quite kingly. So he had a son named Saul, who was a handsome young man. No one in Israel was more handsome than Saul, and he stood head and shoulders above everyone else. So he's rich, handsome, stood out, looked the part. Not bad for a king, right? And ever sometimes think that you were just so lucky to be in that spot at that time, and yeah, it has nothing to do with it. Understand that we have these divine appointments, and Saul was on a divine appointment. We're going to see that in a minute, but it just looks like it's by chance, right? In verse 6 here, but the boy said to him, listen, there's a man of God in this town. He's famous. Everything he says actually happens, so let's go there. Maybe he'll be able to tell us which way we should go. But what we don't know, and we're about to find out in verse 16 of chapter 9, is that Yahweh has already had a conversation with his prophet Samuel. And this is what he said to him. This is the day before. About this time tomorrow, I will send you a man from the Benjamite territory. You will anoint him as leader of my people, Israel. He will save my people from the Philistines' power because I have seen the suffering of my people and their cry for help has reached me. So it's all orchestrated, it's all arranged. And Saul had no idea when he woke up that morning that he would end up being anointed king that day. Just an amazing thing that they just happened, right? I just happened to be at that place at that time. And we see that he makes sure that Samuel doesn't miss the point. In verse 17, when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord told him, that's the man I told you about. That's the one who will rule my people. And what a lot of us are not even aware of is he still speaks this way. He gives us foreknowledge, and then he points out when these things are happening. He arranges us to be in certain places at certain times. He speaks to us. He gives us his knowledge ahead of. He still does that today, but most of us don't want to hear that. Most of us just don't want to hear his voice because then we have to be obedient to it. We would rather just try to do the best that we can to follow the rules and be able to make those decisions ourselves instead of getting directions like this from the Lord. um and then I love pointing this out. You remember what happened to the Benjamites, right? It was a terrible thing that had happened in the one city, and all of Israel came together to punish those men. And the Benjamites wouldn't give up those men, and they defended their kinsmen, and they were pretty well destroyed, except for 600 men, and then the rest of Israel had to basically steal wives for them to keep them going. Well, the Benjamites have not recovered. They're very tiny. It takes a while to build up a population, and they're very tiny. And so we get this reaction from Saul when Samuel is talking to him. He says, I'm a Benjamite. I'm a Benjamite. That means something. I'm a Benjamite. Doesn't mean something great. It means like we're small. We did bad things. I'm a Benjamite, Saul responded, from the smallest Israelite tribe, and my family is the littlest of the families in the tribe of Benjamin. So we're even insignificant among the insignificant. Why would you say something like that to me? See, Yahweh loves to do this. He's redeeming the Benjamites. So he's redeeming the tribe of Benjamin by picking Saul in this way because he loves to be glorified. He loves to use the insignificant. He loves to use the small things because they don't get in the way of him getting the credit and receiving the glory for these things. Um, just chapter 10 here. Just wanted to point out the oil really represents what's about to happen. It's a physical representation of what is about to happen spiritually. So we see that Samuel took out a small jar of oil and poured it over Saul's head and kissed him. The Lord hereby anoints you leader of his people Israel. Samuel said, "You will rule the Lord's people and save them from the power of the enemies who surround them. And this will be the sign for you that the Lord has anointed you as leader of his very own possession." And he describes the actual anointing that will come. Then the Lord's Spirit will come over you. So he gives them a list of signs that are going to happen. You're going to go here, this is going to happen. You're going to go there, that's going to happen. You're going to go here, this is going to happen. And then he says, then the Lord's Spirit will come over you, and you will be caught up in a prophetic frenzy right along with them. It will be like you've become a completely different person. This is what happens with the anointing. We get equipped. It's not about, we don't get called according to our abilities. We get called according to his will. Um, he doesn't pick the most intelligent. He doesn't pick the most talented. He picks who he wants to pick, and it's usually the weakest vessel so that he can receive the greatest glory. And he equips. He equips. And look what happens in verse 9. And just as Saul turned to leave Samuel's side, God gave him a different heart. And all these signs happened that very same day. Now, this is a difference. Understand what's going to happen here. David had a proper heart before he was anointed. His heart was for Yahweh. He was in love with Yahweh. He sung love ballads for Yahweh. He trusted Yahweh. It was just an incredible relationship. His heart was so for Yahweh. But Saul wasn't. Saul was self-centered. Saul was he didn't know any better. He wasn't he was raised in a rich house. He was it's he didn't know how to be dependent. But here his heart is changed. God gave him a different heart. And and it was so that he could be in that right place where he needed to be in submission to Yahweh, in love with Yahweh. And then we have this incident. We always love this, don't we? In verse 22 to 23, we have this description. So they asked another question of the Lord: has the man come here yet? So they've gone through this selection process. Even though he has been anointed, there has to be a public thing. So they've gone through picking which tribe, and then which family, which clan, and then which family, and then who. And so they find out it's Saul, but Saul isn't there. And they're saying, has the man come here yet? The Lord, the Lord, oh yeah, yeah, the Lord tells on us, doesn't he? The Lord said, yes, he's hiding among the supplies. They ran and retrieved Saul from there. He was hiding. And when he stood up in the middle of the people, he was head and shoulders taller than anybody else. We're going to learn in a little bit that he's 30 years old at this time. 30 years old is pretty young to be anointed king and responsible for leading a nation that has never had a king before. And then we see that Yahweh selects the entourage that is to be with the king. In verse 26, Saul also went back to his home in Gibeah. Along with him went courageous men whose hearts God had touched. Do you notice the town he's from? Gibeah? What town was it that caused all the uproar? With the Benjamites and the Israelites that caused the Israelites to descend on them? Was it not Gibeah? Yeah, isn't that interesting? Wow, talk about redeeming. Even goes down and redeems the town. Okay, in verse 27, we see what we find today. There's always critics. It doesn't matter how good of a leader it is. There's always going to be find somebody who finds something that they're not going to agree with, and you just get used to it. That's how it is. It shouldn't be that way, but it's how it is. It shouldn't be that way in the body, but it's how it is because we're all in a different place, different levels of maturity, different levels of revelation. But some despicable people said, how can this man save us? They despised Saul and didn't bring him gifts, but Saul didn't say anything. Remember, it's because they don't understand. It's actually Yahweh that saves, not Saul. Saul would be a rallying point. He's like the lightning rod, but the Lord is the lightning. Lightning. He's the power. In In chapter 11, verse 6, here's what we're talking about here. He needed Yahweh to lead. He couldn't do it on his own. God's spirit came over Saul when he heard those words, and he burned with anger. His spirit entered in, and he's going to receive direction, and he's got power, um, and he'll know what to do here. So we see in verse 7, uh, isn't this interesting that he would do this? Because someone had done it against the Benjamites, and here he's doing it now. As a Benjamite, he's doing this to unite Israel against an outside enemy instead of an inside enemy. He took 2 oxen, cut them into pieces, and sent them by messengers throughout Israel's territory. This is exactly what will happen to the oxen of anyone who doesn't come to the aid of Saul and Samuel. He said, great fear of the Lord came over the people, and they came to Saul completely unified. Notice how he uses Samuel's name in there as well. Now, keep in mind that like this guy has no military training. Israel has no military. We'll discover as well that they have no weapons. Um, there's no military. He's got no military strategy. Nothing whatsoever. The next day, Saul organized his troops into 3 formations. They attacked the Ammonite camp during the morning watch and slaughtered them until the heat of the day. The survivors were so scattered that not even 2 of them could be found together. It's amazing stuff for people who have no military and no military knowledge and no weapons. And verse 15, um, they're so happy, ecstatic that they've had this great victory. So now they're really gonna do the whole coronation thing again, but this time with enthusiasm. So everyone went to Gilgal, and there at Gilgal they made Saul king in the Lord's presence. They offered well-being sacrifices in the Lord's presence, and Saul and all the Israelites had a great celebration there. So now that they have a king, Samuel can retire. But I just want to make it clear here because some people make the mistake. Samuel is retiring as a leader, as a judge, as a military leader. Okay, that's what a judge was, a military leader. So he's retiring from that, but he's not retiring from his position as prophet. He says to them, "The king will lead you now. I am old and gray, though my sons are still with you, and I've been your leader since I was young until now." So he does this history review with them. It's important. He just wants to refresh the memory and so that they don't forget. And so now stand here, and I will judge you in the Lord's presence because of all the Lord's righteous acts that he has done for you and your ancestors. So they renew the covenant relationship here in verse 14 and 15 of chapter 12. If you will fear the Lord, worship him, obey him, and not rebel against the Lord's command, and if both you and the king who rules over you follow the Lord your God, all will be well. But if you don't obey the Lord and rebel against the Lord's command, then the Lord's power will go against you and your king to destroy you. And the signs and wonders kind of seals the deal. Samuel called in verse 18, Samuel called upon the Lord, and God sent thunder and rain on that very day. Then all the people were in awe of the Lord and Samuel. Yeah, and that's the way our preaching is supposed to be today. It's supposed to be with that seal of signs and wonders, of miracles. Um, verses 20 to 21. Look at what it says here. But Samuel answered the people, don't be afraid, because he again presented how they offended Yahweh with the demanding a king, and he says, don't be afraid. Yes, you've done all this evil. Just don't turn back from following the Lord. Serve the Lord with all your heart. Don't turn aside to follow useless idols that can't help you or save you. They're absolutely useless. Okay, so you're forgiven. Let's move forward. Don't make it any worse. Stay away from idols. Um, And then we read this in verse 22, for the sake of his reputation, the Lord won't abandon his people because the Lord has decided to make you his very own people. Why is he faithful? Why is he showing them such grace? Because he decided to make them his own people, and he doesn't change his mind. Calling is irrevocable. That's what you have to keep in mind. Jesus Christ went to the cross because he loves you, and he's not about to change his mind. He knew who you were when he went to the cross. He knew what you did. What you do today is not going to shock him, but he wants you to be in a place of obedience. He wants you to be in a place of love. He wants you to be in a place of fellowship with him, and you shouldn't be in rebellion. You shouldn't be sinning because you've been freed from all of that. But if for some reason you make mistakes and you blow it, he's not going to stop loving you. And then there's the whole question of Samuel's place. You know, what's Samuel's? How does Samuel see his responsibility now? He's no longer the leader, but is a prophet. But me, I would never sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you. I will teach you what is good and right. He will fulfill the responsibility as priest and prophet, and he will teach them the difference between right and wrong. That is the role that he's taking on, more of a father role. So that's a lot that we covered today, and you can see things are coming together, and it's great. So yeah, let's press on. Some of you are going to sit up and take notice now because it's going to get a little more exciting as we see these relationships play out while the kingdom increases, and yeah, so we'll go through Saul and Jonathan. We'll get to David, and we'll see a lot of good stuff. And yeah, we'll continue on after that, right? Okay, so you guys be blessed today. Be encouraged. Pray that you're finding some really good stuff in this. And I will see you guys tomorrow. God bless.